All right, let's talk about something that's kind of mind-bending when you really think about it. A promise. But not just any promise. We're talking about a financial promise that has to stay true for, say, 50, 60, maybe even 70 years. This is the world of things like pensions and life insurance, and let me tell you, it is a huge, huge challenge.
So, that brings us to the big question, right? How can you or I possibly trust a financial promise that's supposed to pay out half a century from now? I mean, the world changes so fast. Economies boom and bust. Technology reshapes everything. People are living longer than ever. How on earth do you account for all of that uncertainty?
Well, you definitely can't just cross your fingers and hope for the best. To even begin to navigate this kind of long-term uncertainty, the professionals in this field need a really solid, structured roadmap. They need a system that's built to handle the surprises the future's definitely going to throw at it.
So, let's pull back the curtain and look at the professional framework they actually use to tackle this exact problem.
And here it is. It's called the Actuarial Control Cycle. This is a fundamental tool for managing risk, and it's really the backbone of our whole discussion today. It's got three main stages. First, you specify the problem you're trying to solve. Simple enough. Second, you develop a solution. But third, and this is the absolute key, you constantly monitor what's actually happening in the real world. Those results then loop all the way back to step one, letting you refine your understanding of the problem and adjust the solution. It's not a straight line, it's a continuous cycle.
Okay, so we've already specified our problem, right? Making these long-term promises. So let's jump to stage 2 of the cycle, developing the solution. And that process starts with choosing a fundamental blueprint for the financial system itself.
One of the most common blueprints is what's known as a pay-as-you-go scheme, or pay-as-you for short. Now, you can think of this like a direct pipeline. The money from people contributing today flows in one end of the pipe and goes straight out the other end to pay the people who are receiving benefits today. There's no big pot of money, no giant reservoir being saved up for the future.
And that really brings the key difference into sharp focus. A pay-as-you-go scheme is totally dependent on the money that's flowing right now. The alternative is a funded scheme, which is all about building up that reservoir in advance, collecting money for decades and investing it so it can grow. So it's really a choice between relying on the contributions of future generations versus relying on the returns from past investments.
All right, so once you've picked a system, the next piece of the puzzle in developing a solution is making some really big assumptions about the future. And maybe the biggest, most complicated assumption of all is about us, about how long we're all actually going to live.
A really important idea here is something called mortality convergence. It's a bit of a technical term, but the concept is actually pretty simple. It's the idea that the gaps in life expectancy between different groups of people, say between wealthy and poor people or people in different professions, might get smaller over time as things like healthcare and nutrition improve for everybody. Getting this assumption right or wrong can have absolutely massive financial consequences 50 years from now.
And you can see just how incredibly complex this is. I mean, look at all these factors. And none of them exist in a vacuum, right? Your education level influences your job, which affects your income and where you can afford to live, which in turn impacts your nutrition. So forecasting mortality isn't just a numbers game. It's about trying to model how an entire society is going to evolve. So given all this deep uncertainty, from the economy to our own lifespans, you need tools to manage all that risk. And you also have to operate within a certain set of rules and constraints.
One of the most powerful tools in the toolbox is a financial option. Now, the magic phrase here is the right, but not the obligation. That's everything. It gives a pension fund manager incredible flexibility. It's kind of like buying insurance against the market tanking while still keeping all the potential to profit if the market soars. When you're managing money over a 50-year timeline, that kind of flexibility is absolutely vital. And options basically come in two main flavors. You've got a call option, which is the right to buy, and that lets you bet on an asset's price going up. Then you have a put option, the right to sell, which lets you protect yourself if you're worried the price might fall. For these long-term funds, these aren't just for gambling. They are essential tools for survival. Okay, so alongside the tools, you have constraints. And a major one is what we call prescriptive regulation. This is basically the government handing you a very detailed rulebook. It might say something like, you are not allowed to invest more than 20% of this fund in international stocks, period. It's very direct, but as you can imagine, it can also be pretty rigid.
You know, designing any of these financial products is a massive balancing act. You're trying to weigh things like profitability against what your competitors are doing and the kind of benefits you're promising. But what's interesting here is how regulation acts as this external force. It creates these hard boundaries, these guardrails that end up influencing every single one of those other decisions.
And all of this brings us right back to the final and, honestly, probably the most important stage of the cycle. You've defined the problem, you've developed the solution with all its tools and constraints, but you are not done, not even close. In fact, the real work is just getting started.
This quote just nails it. No matter how brilliant your models are, no matter how smart you are, your assumptions about the future will almost never be perfect. The world is just too unpredictable. So, the real secret is to use new, up-to-date information to constantly go back and revise those assumptions, and then adapt your solution.
And that's the big takeaway here. The actuarial control cycle isn't a project with a start and a finish line. It's a perpetual loop. It's a process. You monitor what's happening, you learn from it, and you adjust your course. And you do that over and over and over again for decades.
Which kind of leaves us with one last thought to chew on. In a world that is defined by constant change, maybe our ability to keep these incredible decades-long promises isn't about having a perfect crystal ball to predict the future. Maybe, just maybe, it's all about having the discipline to constantly and relentlessly adapt to that future as it actually unfolds. What do you think?